Task Force. Centurion, originally deployed for high-intensity training in the Nevada desert with a subsequent scheduled rotation to the Middle East, represented the absolute quintessence of 21st-century military power. Its core consisted of the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team of the 1st Cavalry Division, Iron Horse, reinforced by a Marine Expeditionary Battalion, a squadron of AH-64E Apache Guardian attack helicopters, and a flight of A-10 Thunderbolt II attack aircraft, operating from a forward jump strip. In total, nearly 6,000 personnel, hundreds of armored vehicles, including M1A2 SEPV-3 Abrams tanks and M2 Bradley fighting vehicles, along with colossal stockpiles of ammunition and fuel. Commanding this armada was Major General Harry the Hammer Stevenson, a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, a man who believed in superior firepower far more than he believed in diplomacy. At 3 o'clock local time, just as the GPS satellite constellation was scheduled to transmit a navigation data update packet, the sky above the proving grounds was torn apart by something that defied description within the bounds of standard physics. It wasn't a nuclear detonation, although radiation sensors spiked off the charts for a split second. It was silence. An absolute ringing silence, followed by a flash of violet light that swallowed the horizon. Gravity seemed to vanish for a fraction of a second, causing multi-ton tanks to bounce on their suspensions and men to experience a wave of nausea, like a sudden drop in an aircraft. Then, the world snapped back into place. But it was a different world. Instead of the dry, dusty Nevada desert, the tank tracks bit into lush, thick grass of a deep emerald hue. The dry heat was replaced by a cool wind carrying the scent of ozone, smoke, and decay. The sky was choked with heavy, leaden clouds through which not a single familiar satellite signal could penetrate. The radio spectrum, usually teeming with digital noise and chatter, was dead. "Report!" Stevenson barked into his field radio microphone from inside his command striker. "What the hell just happened? Where are we? Is this a cyber attack? EMP?" "Sir," the voice of the comms officer trembled. "We've lost contact with the Pentagon. GPS is silent. No satellites. Nothing. But, sir, visual contact. The RQ-7 shadow drones that were airborne during the event. They're transmitting a feed. You need to see this." An image populated the general's tactical tablet. The drone camera didn't show the lights of Las Vegas or Nellis Air Force Base. It showed a massive white fortress carved into the living rock, boasting 7 levels of walls pressed against a mountain range. And to the east, across a great river, the sky burned red, and above jagged black mountains rose a tower crowned with a gigantic eye of fire. "Jesus Christ," the operator whispered. "Are we in some kind of damn movie?" General Stevenson was a pragmatist. If he saw a fortress, it was a fortified position. If he saw fire, it meant an enemy. "All units, code red, 360-degree defense. Deploy artillery, tanks to the outer perimeter. EW officers, scan all frequencies. If anything moves and doesn't respond to IFF, destroy it." We are in a combat zone, boys, even if we don't know what planet it is. The task force had arrived on the Pelennor fields, exactly 2 days before the armies of Mordor were set to begin the siege of Minas Tirith. The appearance of 6,000 modern soldiers with heavy armor did not go unnoticed. Sauron, whose gaze was fixed on Gondor, felt a disturbance in the fabric of reality akin to a hammer blow. He did not understand the nature of this power. It was not magical. It held neither the light of the Valor nor the darkness of Morgoth. It was cold, calculated steel and chemistry. First contact occurred 2 hours after the transfer. A reconnaissance platoon in 3 Humvees mounting Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns moved toward the banks of the Anduin to assess the situation near Osgiliath. Sergeant Michael "Lucky" O'Neill peered through the thermal optic mounted on the roof turret. "I see movement," he reported. "Infantry, lots of infantry. Weapons, swords, spears. Are they LARPers?" Pouring out of the ruins of Osgiliath to meet the jeeps was a horde of orc scouts, the vanguard of the Witch King's army. Seeing the strange, growling carriages without horses, the orcs hesitated for a moment, but bloodlust took over. With wild roars, they charged, loosing clouds of black arrows. "Contact! Open fire!" O'Neill screamed. The .50 caliber machine gun is a terrifying weapon, a bullet weighing 45 grams, traveling at supersonic speeds, doesn't just kill, it tears flesh, shatters bone, and turns crude armor into shrapnel. When 3 M1A2 opened up, the leading edge of the orc charge simply ceased to exist. These orcs were ripped apart, their shields turned to splinters. The sound of the gunfire, thundering and rhythmic, was like a storm never before heard in Middle-earth. "They aren't stopping!" the driver yelled, maneuvering between craters. "There are thousands of them!" "Call it in. Get Artie on the line now." In the HQ, Stevenson listened to the report with a stone face. Hostile forces, strength unknown but significant, aggressive, tech level, medieval. What kind of nonsense is this? He turned to the artillery commander. "Colonel, give them a taste of the Paladins. You have the coordinates. Airburst rounds. Show them the god of war." The M109A7 Paladin self-propelled howitzers elevated their 155mm barrels. The fire control systems, bereft of GPS, operated on laser designation from the drones. Salvo. The shells flew over the plain with a howl that froze the blood of the defenders on the walls of Minas Tirith. They detonated over the eastern bank of the Anduin, directly above the massing Mordor troops preparing to cross. The effect was catastrophic. High explosive fragmentation shells, set to burst 10 meters above the ground, blanketed an area of several football fields in a rain of red-hot steel. Hundreds of orcs, trolls, and Easterlings died instantly, never understanding what had killed them. Panic swept the ranks of Mordor. They were used to catapults, but this was divine retribution. Denethor, steward of Gondor, watched from the walls of the citadel. He saw the flashes on the horizon and heard the thunder, but the sky was clear. "This is not the aid of Rohan," he whispered, clutching the palantir beneath his robes. "This is a new power. Has Sauron brought new demons? Or is this the madness of wizards?" Gandalf the White, standing beside Pippin, frowned. He felt not magic, but a total absence of it. Out there on the field was a force alien to this world, a force of pure reason and mechanism. "We must learn who they are," the wizard said, "before they decide we are enemies as well." Meanwhile, in Barad-dûr, chaos reigned. Sauron realized the threat. His will, usually all-pervading, hit a wall of radio-electronic noise. His spy crows fell dead, struck by invisible beams, microwave radiation from air defense radars. He decided to test these newcomers. From Minas Morgul rose 9 shadows. The Nazgûl, mounted on fell beasts, took to the sky. Their scream, inducing irrational terror, rolled over the Pelennor. The soldiers on the ground felt icy fear clutch their hearts. Some dropped their weapons. Others froze in stupor. "What the hell is that?" screamed a tank company captain. "Air target! Dragons? You gotta be kidding me!" "AWACS sees nothing on radar!" the controller panicked. "They're cold! Thermals barely picked them up!" The Nazgûl dived on the artillery positions. The black breath and the magic of fear were their weapons. One paladin was flipped by a blow from a fell beast's giant talons, its crew shredded. But then the Air Force entered the game. A pair of A-10 Thunderbolt IIs, patrolling the perimeter, received the attack vector. "Tally-ho on the uglies," the pilot call sign Viper said calmly. "Look like big bats. Commencing run, guns." The famous GAU-8 Avenger, a 30mm 7-barrel Gatling cannon, spun up. The sound, burrt, like canvas being torn by the gods, echoed across Middle-earth. Depleted uranium shells, designed to penetrate tank armor, met the flesh of magical beasts. The Witch King, leader of the Nazgûl, was confident in his invulnerability. "No living man may hinder me." But he had never met an automatic cannon firing 3,900 rounds per minute. The burst stitched through his fell beast, turning the creature into a red mist. The Nazgûl himself was thrown back by the shockwave, his spectral form torn apart by sheer kinetic energy, and with a wild wail audible even in the astral plane, he was discorporated, cast back into the world of shadows. The remaining Nazgûl, realizing their magic was powerless against iron birds that spat invisible death, scattered in terror. General Stevenson watched the massive creature fall from the sky. "Excellent. We have air superiority, even if the enemy flies on pterodactyls. Contact that city," he pointed to Minas Tirith. "Send a parley team in Bradleys under a white flag. I need to know where we are, and who the hell these freaks attacking us are." The negotiation team, consisting of 3 M2 Bradleys and 2 Humvees, rolled up to the great gates of Minas Tirith. Gondorian soldiers aimed their bows, but the arrows looked laughable against reactive armor and composite plating. Out of the hatch of the lead vehicle stepped Colonel James Rhodes, hands raised, but with an M1A2 assault rifle hanging on his chest. Gandalf, Imrahil, and a squad of guards came out to meet them. "I am Colonel Rhodes, United States Army," his voice amplified by a megaphone, so echoed off the walls. "We come in peace, but if you show aggression, we will grind this mountain into dust. Who's in charge here?" Gandalf stepped forward, leaning on his staff. "You speak the common tongue, yet strangely," the wizard said. "I am Mithrandir. You come in an hour of great need, travelers. These freaks, as you call them, are servants of Sauron, enemy of all free peoples." "Sauron," Rhodes repeated, recording on a dictaphone. "So we have a common enemy. That's good. My general wants to meet with your command. And tell me, do you have oil? Or uranium? Hell, even electricity?" The dialogue of cultures was difficult. The Gondorians looked at the soldiers as gods or demons. Night vision goggles, Kevlar helmets, digital camouflage. It was all beyond their comprehension. But when Rhodes showed them the tablet video of the Nazgûl's destruction, hope lit up in the eyes of the men. Meanwhile, in Mordor, panic was turning into strategy. Sauron was furious. His lieutenants reported steel chariots that shot thunder and birds faster than the wind. The plan for a quick victory had collapsed. The enemy was strong, but Sauron was cunning. He realized a direct attack was suicide. He needed to use what the newcomers lacked: infinite manpower and magic. He ordered the sluice gates of Morgul opened. Not just an army, but the entire horde. Hundreds of thousands of orcs, trolls, wargs, and he began to prepare a ritual of darkness. If he could not defeat them with fire, he would blind them. The clouds coming from Mordor grew thicker. They began to block not just sunlight, but radio signals. Communications between US units began to glitch. Drones lost control links. "General, "We have a problem," reported the EW officer. "Jamming levels are rising. It's not tech, it's atmospheric, and it's radioactive. Like the air has become viscous. Our thermals are starting to show phantoms." Stevenson frowned. "They're adapting. Smart bastards. All right, switch to landlines within the perimeter. Tanks hull down. Prep the MLRS systems. If they want meat, we'll give them a grinder." The night before the battle was surreal. Soldiers cleaned weapons by the light of glow sticks, staring at the burning Mount Doom. "Hey, Sarge?" Private Ramirez asked, looking at the walls of Minas Tirith. "You think they got elves in there? Like in the books?" "Shut up, Ramirez. Check your ammo. If that thing that fell today was their air force, I'm scared to imagine what their infantry is." At that moment, the ground shook, not from explosions, but from footsteps. Grond, the giant wolf-headed battering ram, was being dragged by hundreds of trolls. But the army of Mordor wasn't marching to the city gates. It was deploying toward the American camp. Sauron had decided the new threat was more important than Gondor. A sea of torches filled the horizon. There weren't 100,000. There were more. The full might of the east and south combined. The Haradrim on their Mumakil, giant elephants, lined up on the flanks. "Targets!" the spotters screamed. "Enemy tanks? No, it's giant elephants!" "Elephants?" Stevenson looked through his binoculars. "What size?" 5 stories tall, sir." "Tank Battalion Alpha, concentrate fire on the elephants. On Bradleys, work the infantry with cluster munitions. Apaches, lift off. Burn them." The battle began, one that would go down in the history of both worlds as the slaughter on the Pelennor. Abrams tanks opened fire from 3 kilometers out. 120mm M1A2 depleted uranium sabots punched through Mumakil hides like paper. The giant beasts toppled, crushing their own troops. Towers on their backs exploded from HE impacts. But the orcs were too many. They came like an avalanche, ignoring losses. Machine guns mowed them down by the thousands, barrels glowing red-hot, having to be swapped mid-fight. Mountains of corpses grew in front of American positions, creating natural barricades. "They're climbing over the bodies!" the gunner screamed. "They don't stop!" In the sky, the Apaches unleashed hell. Hellfire missiles found trolls, turning them into chunks of meat. 30mm chains, guns minced ranks of infantry. But then, the unforeseen happened. Sauron used his dark will. One of the Apaches, piloted by Lieutenant Kowalski, suddenly lost control. The electronics didn't fail, no, the pilot simply went mad. He saw not instruments in his cockpit, but the eye. He screamed and dove the helicopter into the ground, straight into a formation of his own tanks. Explosion. Burning fuel engulfed 2 Abrams. "Kowalski went psycho!" screamed the radio. "Psi attack! All crews, seal hatches, helmets on! It's mental warfare!" Gandalf, watching from the wall, understood. He leaped onto Shadowfax and raced toward the American camp. He needed to give them magical protection, or their minds would shatter under Sauron's pressure. Meanwhile, the Olog High, battle trolls in heavy plate, breached the forward line. They withstood small arms fire and reached the line of Bradleys. One troll, roaring in pain, bullets riddled him but didn't kill him instantly, smashed a massive mace into a BF-5, crushing its side and concussing the crew. "Breach on the left flank!" the radio yelled. "Trolls inside the perimeter! Need infantry support!" Marines engaged in close quarters battle. A T-4 and SMAW rocket launchers were fired at point-blank range. Flamethrowers purged everything living. The battle turned into chaos. Tech clashed with primal fury. Stevenson realized passive defense would lead to ammo depletion before the orcs ran out. Activate Protocol Jericho. Prep the ATACMS tactical missiles with cluster warheads. Target enemy rear lines. Cut off reinforcements. And get word to Colonel Rhodes. Tell that wizard to do something about this damn fear. My men are starting to panic for no reason. At the height of the battle, just as the wave of orcs seemed about to overwhelm the positions, Aragorn arrived on the Corsair ships. Or rather, he should have arrived. But the ships had been destroyed on approach by a stray salvo of American artillery that mistook them for enemy reinforcements. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, miraculously surviving, swam to shore on debris. "These are not men," Gimli spat water. "These are some mad dwarves with thunder sticks. They sank my fleet." "We must reach them," Aragorn shouted. "They have the power to crush Mordor, but they lack the knowledge. The army of the dead is still with us, even underwater." At that moment, the sky over Mordor began to change. Sauron, seeing his army being ground into paste, Makshon decided to open his main reserves. Out of the Black Gate marched not just troops. Out came ancient horrors that had slept for ages. And most terrifyingly, he began to distort space. The distance between the American positions and Mount Doom began to shrink. The mountain was coming closer. "Sir, geological shifts," an officer reported. "The volcano! It's 10 clicks away now, and it's active!" Fireballs launched from Orodruin's crater, heading for the camp. Magmatic artillery. "Shoot them down!" Stevenson roared. "Air defense! Engage the rocks!" C-RAM Centurion systems buzzed, unleashing walls of lead at the flying boulders, shattering them in mid-air into harmless gravel that rained down on soldiers and orcs alike. Gandalf burst into the command center, HQ tent, glowing with white light. Security soldiers aimed rifles at him. "Lower your weapons, fools," the wizard thundered. "Your general needs me." Stevenson turned. "You're that Gandalf? Make my pilots stop going crazy, and I'll give you a Medal of Honor." "Your minds are open, General. The enemy whispers to you. I can create a mental shield, but I must be at the center of your camp, and you must attack now. He fears you, but if you wait, he will find a way to shut down your machines. I feel his shadow penetrating your circuits." It was true. Radar screens began showing symbols in the black speech. Targeting systems glitched. Tank engines stalled without cause. "We have one shot," Stevenson said, looking at the map. "We punch a corridor straight to his front door. Armored wedge. We use everything we have." "It is madness," Gandalf said. "But it is exactly what he does not expect." "All units!" The general's voice was steel. "Listen to my order. We are not dying here in the mud. We are going to pay a visit to this one-eyed son of a bitch. Tanks, wedge formation, infantry, mount up, artillery, rolling barrage ahead of us. We are going to Mordor." And so, under the cover of white light emanating from Gandalf's staff as he rode on the hull of the lead Abrams, the American army went on the counteroffensive. It was a majestic and terrifying sight. 60 tons of American steel, gas turbine engines roaring, crushed orcs, turning them into bloody pulp. But ahead awaited something worse than orcs. At the Black Gate stood not just troops, there stood Balrogs. Not one, as in Moria, but 7. Sauron had summoned shadows of the past. Two fiery demons with whips of flame and swords of darkness blocked the column's path. A tank shell struck a Balrog's chest. The explosion knocked the demon back but did not kill it. Fire and shadow reformed. Conventional weapons won't hold them, Gandalf shouted. We need sacred light or incredible energy. Stevenson heard this. Incredible energy? Lieutenant, do we have any of those experimental rounds left? Sir? You mean the tactical low-yield nuclear munitions for the howitzers? The Davy Crockett's were decommissioned long ago, but we have a couple of M1A2 enhanced thermobaric rounds. Load them. Target the center demon. Fire. The shell hit the Balrog. It wasn't a nuke, but the thermobaric effect incinerated the oxygen in a 500-meter radius. The pressure crushed the demon, rupturing its physical shell, and the vacuum sucked out its flame. The Balrog roared and vanished. It works! The tankers cheered. Light 'em up! The U.S. Army smashed through toward Mordor, leaving a swath of death and destruction, while Sam and Frodo, who were crawling up the slopes of Mount Doom at that moment, looked down in horror as the plain of Gorgoroth turned into a branch of hell, lit by tracer flashes and explosions. Mr. Frodo, Sam whispered. Looks like the orcs found someone worse than themselves. Frodo clutched the ring. It became heavy as lead. Sauron was panicking. His attention was split between the army at his gates and the small hobbit he suddenly sensed, because his concentration on the war was broken by the pain of his losses. At that moment, Stevenson received intel. Sir, we've detected a signal source. Massive energy spike inside the volcano. And also, 2 heat signatures. Small, human. They're almost at the objective. Gandalf, hearing this, grabbed the radio. He learned fast. Do not fire on the mountain. The ring-bearer is there. He carries Sauron's death. Your job is to distract the eye. Distract? Stevenson smirked. We'll give him a light show he'll forget his name. Colonel, launch all tomahawks. Target, Barad-dûr. Knock that tower down to hell. 20 cruise missiles, launched from mobile batteries, streaked into the sky, leaving smoke trails. They bypassed defensive spells, which were tuned for magic, not high-speed kinetic penetrators with onboard computers, and slammed into Barad-dûr. Sauron saw them. He tried to swat them with his gaze, but there were too many. Impact. The top of the tower exploded. The eye winked out for a moment, losing focus. A stone reinforced with sorcery crumbled under concrete-piercing warheads. The entire Mordor army froze. Their god was wounded. Forward! Yelled Aragorn, who had managed to catch up to the tanks on horseback. For Gondor and for the USA! The strange alliance of magic and technology entered the final phase of the assault, unaware that the real test was only beginning. For the tear in reality that brought them here began to widen, and from it stared something older than Sauron and colder than deep space. The rift, caused by the violent collision of 2 incompatible realities, the quantum physics of our world and the metaphysical magic of Middle-earth, began to widen. From the crack, resembling a jagged wound across the sky, monsters did not emerge. Instead, silence poured out. It was not merely an absence of sound, but an antimatter, stirred an unraveling of existence. Where the black mist touched the ground, rocks, orc corpses, and the burning hulks of tanks simply vanished. They weren't destroyed, they ceased to be, leaving behind perfectly smooth voids, like dead pixels in reality. Sir! Screamed the radar operator in the command striker. Signal loss on all frequencies. Drones are dropping. Electronics are going haywire. Processors are melting. General Stevenson slammed his fist onto the console. The digital maps flickered and were replaced by static. Is it an EMP? Worse, sir. Physical constants are shifting. Gravity is fluctuating. Fuel in the engines is losing combustibility. Gandalf, his face gray with strain, shouted over the noise of the faltering battle. The world is rejecting you. Your weapons, your machines, they are alien. The fabric of Ea is trying to expel the infection. Sauron has bound his essence to this world, and now that you are breaking him, you are breaking the world itself. On the front lines, a nightmare unfolded. The M1A2 Abrams tanks, the pride of the American military-industrial complex, suddenly turned into useless lumps of metal. Their sophisticated fire control systems threw errors. Laser rangefinders read infinity. Shells leaving the barrels sometimes turned into flocks of moths, or simply evaporated in midair. The orcs, seeing the iron beasts slow down, regained their morale. Sauron, his tower smoking from the tomahawk strikes, gathered his will into a fist. He realized the intruders were losing their power. "Destroy them!" His voice roared in the minds of millions of his slaves. "They are mortal. Their magic is fading." Lieutenant Kowalski, not the pilot but his infantry namesake, watched in horror as his M4 carbine jammed. "Weapon malfunction! Powder isn't igniting!" Colonel Rhodes, drawing his sidearm, tried to fire at a charging Uruk-hai, but the hammer clicked on a dude primer. The orc raised a scimitar for the killing blow. "Bayonets!" Rhodes screamed, recalling history lessons that had seemed useless in the 21st century. "Fix bayonets! Beat them with the stocks!" It was a bloodbath. U.S. Marines, stripped of their technological advantage, were forced into hand-to-hand combat with creatures stronger and fiercer than men. Kevlar held against rusty blades, but kinetic force shattered bones. "Gandalf!" Stevenson grabbed the wizard by his robes. "Do something! Are you a wizard or a conjurer with a rabbit? Chuti, my boys are being slaughtered like cattle." The wizard pushed the general back and slammed his staff against the armor of a tank. "I need to ground your reality. I need faith. Not in God, but in your weapons. Order them to believe that they work. In this world, will shapes matter?" Stevenson, grasping the insane logic of this place, grabbed a megaphone. "Listen to me. This is an order. Your weapons work. You are the United States Army. No magic stops a 5.56 round. Shoot! I said shoot, you sons of bitches!" The collective will of 6,000 soldiers, raised on the belief in the invincibility of their technology, created a mental resonance. Gandalf channeled this flow. The world shuddered and bent. The laws of physics, fueled by the magic of belief, snapped back into place in a localized area around the front. Rifles roared once more. Tanks roared to life. But now, their muzzle flashes glowed with a faint blue light. Mana had infused the ammunition. "It worked!" Rhodes exhaled, gunning down a troll at point-blank range. "We're back in business. Hold the line!" Meanwhile, on the slopes of Mount Doom, the drama reached its apogee. Frodo Baggins, exhausted and broken, crawled toward the Sammath Nor. The ring around his neck weighed a ton, but now it whispered to him not of dominion over the world, but something else. "Put me on," hissed Sauron's voice, mixed with metallic screeching. "Look at them, these invaders. They will burn our world. They respect neither forests nor mountains. They will cover Middle-earth in asphalt and factories. Only I can stop them. Only we. Become the general of the Iron Army. With my power, you will enslave their machines." Frodo saw visions. The Shire covered in skyscrapers, hobbits working on assembly lines, and smoking stacks replacing green hills. This terrified him more than orcs. "No," he rasped. Sam, carrying his master on his back, looked down. What he saw was hell. Flashes of explosions, tracers, searchlight beams slicing the darkness. It was too loud, too bright for a gardener. "We have to end this, Mr. Frodo, so all of this goes away." Inside the cavern, over the lava, Frodo stood up. He held the ring over the abyss. At that moment, Sauron, sensing mortal danger, forgot about the U.S. Army. He diverted all remaining Nazgûl forces to the mountain. But in the sky, they were already waiting. A flight of F-16 fighting falcons. They'd launched from the improvised strip in the rear, a dirt road in Ithilien reinforced with magic and engineering mats, intercepted the ringwraiths. Eagle 1, tally on targets. 8 bogeys, heading for the mountain. Copy, cleared to engage. Fox 2. The Nazgûl tried to evade, but the thermal guidance of the AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles knew no error. One by one, the winged horrors turned into balls of fire. The last Nazgûl, the Witch King himself, discorporated earlier, but reformed by the power of the ring, tried to break through. The F-16 pilot, Captain Miller, saw he was out of missiles. "I'm going for a ram," he said calmly over the radio. The jet fighter, at supersonic speed, slammed into the spectral beast. An explosion of jet fuel and magic lit up the sky brighter than the sun. Miller ejected at the last second, but his plane, turning into a fiery arrow, knocked the Nazgûl out of the sky right above the volcano's mouth, preventing it from entering. Frodo stood at the edge. The ring screamed. "It is mine!" he shouted, slipping the ring onto his finger. Sauron roared triumphantly. He sensed Frodo. He instantly directed a blast of mental force to paralyze the hobbit. But he hadn't accounted for Gollum, the creature who couldn't care less about geopolitics, the U.S. Army, or rifts in reality, lunged at the invisible Frodo. A struggle ensued. On any other day, it would have been a tragedy. But today, space itself was unstable. Gollum bit off the finger with the ring. He danced with joy on the edge. "Precious, our precious!" At that moment, a stray shell from an M777 howitzer, fired from 20 kilometers away on Blind Coordinates Mountain, struck the peak of Orodruin. The cavern roof cracked. The vibration knocked Gollum off balance. He fell, clutching the ring to his chest, happy and insane, straight into the magma. The one ring touched the fire. In a normal world, it would have simply melted, destroying Sauron's power. But here, in the presence of the rift anomaly and a battlefield saturated with technogenic energy, a chain reaction occurred. Sauron's energy, released, collided with the antimatter of the rift. "Flash!" shouted the observers in dark goggles. It wasn't a nuclear explosion. It was an implosion. Barad-dûr didn't just collapse. It was sucked into itself. The Black Gates, the army of orcs, the trolls, everything bound to Sauron's will began to crumble into dust. Sauron, the great Maya, in the last moment of his existence, saw not darkness, but the blinding white light of searchlights, and heard not curses, but a dry voice over a radio link. Target destroyed. Confirmed impact. The shockwave cleared the sky. The clouds of Mordor, which had hung for millennia, were blown away by a wind of incredible force. The sun, the real bright sun, hit the black earth. The rift in the sky, deprived of the fuel from the conflict of magics, since the source of dark magic vanished, began to slowly heal, leaving behind only a faint northern light. The orc army, stripped of their master's will, turned into a mob of terrified animals. They dropped their weapons and ran, but there was nowhere to run. Tanks and infantry surrounded the remnants, but the order to fire no longer came. "Cease fire," Stevenson commanded. "They're surrendering." We need prisoners for construction work. 6 months later, Governor General Stevenson sat in his new office on the upper tier of Minas Tirith, now designated Fort Hope. The window offered a view of the Pelennor fields. Where death once reigned, there now stood neat rows of refugee tents and modular barracks. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was laying an asphalt road to Osgiliath. On the general's desk lay a report. Mission status: isolation. No contact with Earth. Probability of return: 0%. Integration status: 45%. Local population eagerly adopting agritech and medicine. Elves protesting drilling operations in Ithilien. Dwarves are delighted with C4 explosives and are requesting a manufacturing license. The door opened, and Aragorn, now King Elessar, walked in. But instead of a crown, he wore a field cap, besom and over his royal robes, a tactical vest. "Harry," said the king, accustomed to informal communication, "we have a problem with Rohan. Éomer is unhappy that your tanks are tearing up the grazing lands, and he wants to buy another batch of those iron horses you call Humvees." Stevenson sighed and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Stocks were dwindling rapidly, but local alchemists were already working on a substitute. "Tell Éomer that fuel isn't infinite. We're switching vehicles to bioethanol, but it takes time." "What about Gandalf?" "He left." Aragorn sat in an armchair. "He said his time has passed. The Third Age ended, but the Fourth Age did not begin as foretold. It is not the age of men, Harry. It is the age of progress. He said magic is leaving because there is no place for it next to your reactors." "We didn't want to kill the magic," the general said quietly. "We just wanted to survive." "I know," Aragorn smiled. "But honestly, I like antibiotics more than healing spells. And the sewage system you built in the lower city, that is a true miracle." Down in the city, at the White Tree Bar, a group of Marines and Gondorian soldiers were watching a football match streamed from a laptop, recordings of old games. The hobbits, Frodo and Sam, guests of honor, sat at a table. Sam was studying a manual for a lawnmower, while Frodo, free of the ring's burden but still melancholic, looked at the stars. "Do you think, Sam," he asked, "will we ever see Valinor?" "I don't know, Mr. Frodo," Sam replied, adjusting a baseball cap with a NY logo. "But the general said their scientists are building some kind of radio telescope. They say we might hear voices from the stars. Maybe we'll hear the elves." Middle-earth had changed forever. It didn't become paradise. It became a complex, noisy, industrial world where orcs worked in mines wearing hard hats and formed unions under strict military police supervision, where elves wrote melancholic songs about pollution and men learned democracy and corruption simultaneously. But the darkness was gone. In its place came electric light. And when the sun rose over Mordor, which was now a proving ground for nuclear testing and rare earth mining, it reflected off the solar panels of a new power plant, fueling a world that would never be the same. "Sir," the adjutant peeked into the general's office, "we received a strange signal from the north, weak but modulated. Looks like Morse code." Stevenson raised his head. Hope, which he had buried, pricked his heart. "What is it?" "One word, sir, repeating over and over." "Which one?" "Russians." Stevenson and Aragorn exchanged glances. "Looks like," the general smirked, pulling out a cigar. "We didn't transfer alone. Hey, Aragorn, prep the diplomats. It seems we have neighbors in the north, and if I know history, they're going to want to divide this world." The Game of Thrones was over. The Cold War of Middle-earth had begun.